my family failed to inform me about the most crucial matter, which led to the devastation of my entire life. It's difficult for me to accept that I've lived in ignorance for so long, only discovering my minor condition at such a late stage. Had I been alerted sooner, perhaps I could have detected my unfaithful wife's deception earlier, as she seemed to fear nothing. In August, I went for my routine annual physical. This year, I saw a new doctor since my previous one had retired. Dr. Marion Welmer, a young woman with red hair in her early 30s, conducted the examination. I felt somewhat uneasy about her performing the physical, especially due to the intimate nature of the exam and my fear of embarrassment. The nurse handled the initial procedures, including measuring my blood pressure, performing an EKG, and testing my memory recall with items like book, apple, table, a test that always made me nervous. My primary worry was the potential embarrassment of being examined by a young, attractive woman. However, my anxiety ensured there was no chance of feeling aroused. After that part of the examination, Dr. Welmer smiled and said, "I bet you're relieved that's over." "Yes, I am." "Thank you," I responded with a smile. The rest of the examination went as expected. My blood work was excellent, and all other tests were normal. As we were wrapping up, she asked, "Do you have 3 children?" "Yes, 2 boys and a girl," I answered. "Are they adopted?" "No, through in vitro fertilization." "Why do you ask?" She blushed. "Well, I'm new here and I reviewed all your records before this meeting." "I see. Well, never mind." "Thank you for being so punctual," she seemed flustered. "You need to clarify, doctor." "It concerns my body, Mr. Miller." "You have a condition, you've been infertile since birth, Mr. Miller." "That's me, Ted Miller." "Oh no, no one informed you?" "No." "Please make copies of all my medical records." I was now utterly shocked. "Of course, I apologize. I shouldn't have brought it up." "No, it's all right." Apparently, too many people have kept silent. I received the documents within approximately 30 minutes. In the meantime, I pondered my situation. I was 48 years old and had been married to Melissa for 26 years. Together we had 3 children, Brad, aged 24, Mary, aged 22, and William, aged 20 or so I thought. Brad was already married and expecting a child, Mary had recently graduated from college, while William was a rising junior. I couldn't help but wonder about their biological father. However, upon reflection, I found myself doubting Dr. Welmer's assertion. Despite some doubts, all 3 children bore some resemblance to me. Upon receiving the records, I brought them to my office and scanned through them meticulously. I explored various avenues to verify Dr. Welmer's claims. Eventually, I reached out to a college friend of mine who happened to be a doctor in New York. He returned my call within an hour. His name was Mark Madden, a urologist. Close enough, I greeted Mark, expressing my need for consultation but emphasizing the requirement for remote communication and strict confidentiality. "Tell me what you need," he responded, prompting me to explain the situation. "Send me the relevant records via email and I'll review them this afternoon," he instructed. "Consider it done, and please, expedite the process," I replied, highlighting the urgency. He returned my call at 3:30. "Ted, you were born with a condition that has led to infertility. I presume you haven't addressed it?" "I wasn't aware of it," I admitted. "Back when you were born and diagnosed, there weren't any viable solutions. However, there have been advancements in the last decade," he explained. "Could you send me some introductory information on that, Mark?" I requested. "Absolutely, I'll email it to you shortly." "Best of luck," he wished me. "Thank you." "Hey, Ted, do you have children?" Mark inquired. "Yes, or at least I thought so," I responded. "I understand now. Best of luck with that, he said empathetically. After ending the call, I promptly contacted a DNA lab to arrange for the delivery of testing kits, ensuring they would arrive the same day, which they did by 5 o'clock. I placed them inside my briefcase and headed home. My youngest child, William, was still at home from school and would be leaving the next week. As I contemplated, it struck me that testing one of the children was sufficient. Will was at home when I arrived, engrossed in reading in the living room. Melissa was in the kitchen cooking. She typically returned home early from her job in real estate sales, which was through an agency owned by my older brother, Robert. The aroma of cooking fish filled the air. The three of us enjoyed crusted cod and salad for dinner. It was delicious. I think Mel noticed my quiet demeanor, but Will perhaps did not. Melissa is also 48 years old. She hasn't gained a pound since college where we first met. She shares my dark brown hair and eyes, stands at 5 feet 8 inches, weighs 130 pounds, and is quite attractive. As Mel tidied up, I discreetly took a glass that Will had used during dinner. Later, I took it upstairs and swabbed the rim with the cotton swab. Then, I went into Will's room and collected some hairs from his brush. I also swabbed the neckline of a t-shirt and his laundry hamper, as well as his sneakers. After swabbing my own cheek, I sealed all the samples into envelopes and placed them in my briefcase. That evening, Will left. As he departed, Mel inquired, "What's up with you, Ted? You seem quiet. You had your checkup, is everything all right?" "Yep, fit as a fiddle, I suppose. I was just a bit anxious about the new doctor." "How was she?" "Good, attractive. I was a bit jittery, you know," she chuckled, her laughter was infectious. "You didn't get nervous, did you?" "No, too anxious about getting nervous." "Well, I have an appointment with her next week. I'll inquire just to be sure." I walked away. Later that night, she desired intimacy, but I expressed that I wasn't feeling well. She accepted it somewhat, Grace F. It was uncommon for me to decline her. The following day, I personally delivered the DNA samples to the lab. I opted for expedited processing. They assured me results by Friday, just 2 days away. I headed to the office where I serve as a lawyer for an investment bank, overseeing a team of 6 other attorneys based in D.C. We're in close proximity to regulatory matters. With 22 years of experience, I've established a comfortable living, supplemented by valuable stock options. Despite feeling preoccupied, I managed to fulfill my responsibilities at work. I commuted by bicycle, seeking solace in the physical activity. Upon returning home at 6, Mel was absent, leaving a note about sandwiches and salad in the fridge. She mentioned attending a showing and possibly going out with friends, which wasn't unusual behavior for her. However, recent doubts clouded my trust. Resorting to tracking her phone, I discovered it wasn't at a nightclub but rather at a motel near the Fairfax line. I had dinner and chatted with Will about the upcoming school year. He seemed eager for a debate. His summer job had been working at a bike repair shop, making decent money, but his recent breakup with Lisa had left him feeling a bit down. I turned in early for the night. Mel came home around 11 o'clock and slipped into bed without showering. When I tried to cuddle with her, she hesitated, which confirmed my suspicion that she had been unfaithful, though I wasn't sure with whom. I had no intention of engaging in intimacy with her. The next morning, I woke up early and biked to work as usual. After showering at the office, I jumped into a busy morning. Around 1 o'clock, I received a call from the DNA lab, and they emailed me a report. The technician informed me over the phone that the DNA samples belonged to my nephew, Will. I was stunned. I only had one sibling, Robert, who was 3 years older than me. Throughout our childhood, he had always been there for me. We were similar in size, both 6 feet tall with medium builds. Robert was a talented athlete in school and played basketball at university, although he wasn't a star player. After graduating, he entered the real estate business and eventually established his own firm. He married his college sweetheart, Glenda Wilson, and they had 3 children, all of whom had graduated from college and were employed. Approximately 4 years ago, Melissa began working for his company. Previously, she had been working as a substitute teacher. I was making good money, and she didn't need to work. However, Will was old enough to take care of himself after school, and she desired something more stimulating, at least that's what she claimed. During that period, I had complete distrust in anything she said. Following the revelation of the DNA news, I sat and contemplated what might have occurred. All 3 of my children were born in late September. I traced it back from there and ended up around Christmas time. When Mel and I decided to start a family, she stopped taking birth control pills. We attempted to conceive for a few months leading up to the last Christmas before Brad was born. It was a typical Christmas with a large family gathering, including Rob and his family. I remember that after Christmas that year and for many subsequent years, Mel and her friend Linda Green would embark on a week-long meditation retreat. They would leave on Boxing Day and return on New Year's Day. Some years, they extended their stay for an additional week. Supposedly, the retreat took place at a facility in the mountains of West Virginia. When Brad was born, Mel didn't participate in the retreat the following year. However, she resumed the tradition the year after that. Mary was born the following September. During Mary's infancy, there were no breaks in her care. However, when she reached 15 months old, Linda resumed their outings. Will join them the following September. These outings persisted for several years until Mel began working for Rob, at which point they ceased. Linda Green had been Mel's closest friend since college and had joined Rob's new company when it was established. Consequently, the 3 of them had been working together for quite some time. The weekend mentioned was when they took Will back to college. They rented a van and enjoyed a pleasant 2-hour drive on Saturday. After having lunch with Will and assisting him in moving into an apartment he shared with his friend Mike Watson, Mel and the speaker bid him farewell and departed. Admitting that he remained silent when alone with Mel, the speaker eventually caught her attention. Mel expressed concern, noticing his reticence. "What's wrong? You haven't said a word," she asked, looking worried. "I've got a lot on my mind, Mel. A lot. It's not something I want to discuss right now," he replied mysteriously. "Then, Ted, you're not hiding anything physical, are you?" "No, just leave it, Mel. That's my best advice for now." For the remainder of the journey, which lasted about an hour, they exchanged few words. The speaker dropped Mel off and returned the van before heading to a local bar, where he had a beer and continued to contemplate. I couldn't envision any scenario where Mel underwent a medical procedure to conceive with Rob. There was only one explanation: they had been intimate repeatedly for years. It was likely that Mel had encountered Rob at the motel. As I sat in the bar, a sudden wave of anger washed over me like never before. You know how they say you see red? It felt just like that. Everything I laid eyes on had an odd hue. I must have startled the young female bartender. I threw a $10 bill on the counter and stormed out. I had a couple of friends I often played cards and tennis with, and Ned Barr was my closest buddy. I drove straight to his house. Ned and Mel never had a good relationship, and his wife, Sadie, wasn't particularly close to Mel either. Their kids were away at school, so when I rang the doorbell, Sadie answered with Ned close behind. They could immediately tell I was in a rough state. Ned, he had a small gym set up in a garage out back. "I need to use the punching bag, Ned," I said. Ned and I regularly attended self-defense classes at a nearby gym, so I knew he had one. "Of course," he replied. We headed out back, and I put on some gloves before attacking his heavy bag as if my life depended on it, with Ned observing silently. After the initial burst of energy, I became more methodical, relentlessly striking and kicking until I could go on no longer. Ned came to get me and assisted me toward his residence. I collapsed onto a chaise lounge on his patio. Sadie brought me some water. As I began to recover slightly, tears started to flow. Ned inquired, "Has someone passed away or been injured?" "No, not yet." My tears transformed into frustration. They both wisely gave me space. After 10 minutes, Ned handed me a beer. Sadie joined me. She remarked, "Now that you've let it all out, you have to tell us." I made them promise to keep it confidential. Then I divulged everything to them. They were both shocked. Ned asked, "How?" "I mean, without them telling you, and your parents must have known." I considered that the medical records from my childhood were clear about the condition. They were aware. Sadie inquired, "What do you plan to do?" "Not entirely sure, but I won't just accept it without a fight." "Please don't react like you did with the bag. Jail isn't a good place." "I won't." "I suppose I should head home now. Mel will be concerned, and I'd rather avoid a confrontation, at least for the time being." I drove back to my house. Mel was waiting anxiously at the door. "Where have you been?" I was so worried. "I stopped for a beer and met Ned. Ended up at his place for some boxing practice." "I'm sorry, I should have called." I headed up for a shower, and we opted for a light meal. On Sunday, we enjoyed a picnic at the local park and indulged in some roller skating. However, intimacy didn't happen on either night, which seemed to leave Mel feeling disappointed and puzzled. The next morning, I rose early and left for work without disturbing her. I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer in the adjacent building and visited our bank. Additionally, I stopped by HR at my firm to arrange for direct deposit switching and to update the beneficiary of my retirement account, which proved to be challenging. During my consultation, the lawyer informed me about divorce procedures in our state. Millie Stanton, the lawyer, also mentioned that I might have a case of fraud involving my wife and brother, which could be useful. I had her prepare the divorce petition with alternative grounds but held off on serving Mel until I was ready. That evening, I installed a tracking program on Mel's cell phone, which was under my plan, enabling me to access her texts and call logs. I discreetly placed 3 small sound recorders in our house, kitchen, bedroom, and living room, and 1 in her car. I asked Mel to organize a cookout at our place for Friday night, inviting Rob and Glenda. On Monday and Tuesday, I claimed to be working late due to a pressing matter. However, on Wednesday, I returned home promptly. We enjoyed a pleasant dinner, and I maintained a positive demeanor, although intimacy remained absent, much to Mel's evident disappointment. Afterwards, I downloaded the data from the recording devices and examined her phone while Mel slept. I listened attentively. There wasn't much to review. The house remained empty during the day, and Mel didn't engage in self-conversations. There were 2 calls logged, one to Rob's mobile and another to my mom's. My mom had been a widow for 5 years. She was 78 and lived in the house where I grew up, about 30 minutes away. The call to my mom came first. I could hear Mel's end of the conversation. "Mom, have you heard from Tim recently?" Pause. "Well, he seems different ever since his physical. He's been acting strange." Pause. "I'm not sure, just thought I'd checked in." "All right." Next was the call to Rob. "Rob, it's Mel." Pause. "No, we can't do that this week. You guys are coming over on Friday, and Tim is acting odd." Pause. "I'm not sure. I don't see how he could know anything." Pause. "Well, we're being cautious, and besides, I think he received bad news from the physical." "All right, see you soon, babe." The essence of that conversation marked the definitive end of my marriage. They persisted in their actions. Initially, I pondered whether they believed they were doing me a favor. However, regardless of their intentions, I was determined to retaliate as much as possible. Rob and Glenda arrived at 6:30 on Friday. Mel and I were preparing a meal: grilled burgers, fries, and salad. Throughout, I deliberately ignored Mel, who noticed but remained silent. When the doorbell rang, Mel glanced at me and remarked, "I hope you're not going to be in a bad mood all night, Tim." I remained silent and went to answer the door. Rob and Glenda greeted me, with Glenda offering a hug. Rob attempted the same, but I turned away. I served them drinks: beer for Rob, white wine for Glenda, and we all sat on the patio together. "I'm filing for divorce, Mel." "You'll receive the petition on Monday," I stated. Mel began to cry, while Rob stood up and loomed over me. "You jerk. I'm going to make you pay." Glenda's gaze was fixed. Rob attempted to strike me while I sat on the porch chair. I pushed back, distancing myself from him, and tumbled over the chair. Rising to my feet, I uttered, "You're angry, you're a hypocritical jerk. Let's settle this." He growled and lunged at me, throwing punches. I ducked under his fist and delivered a blow to his stomach. He wasn't nearly as physically fit as I was, and the punch winded him. Nevertheless, I struck him in the gut again. Unaffected by Mel's screams, I continued hitting Rob until he slumped against my shoulder. Then, I kneed him in the groin and dropped him onto the patio. Turning around, I saw Glenda standing, but she was merely watching as Mel rushed to Rob's aid. He was conscious but groaning. Mel glanced up at me. "You had no justification for hurting Rob, none. You're brutal. You could have seriously harmed him." She was still sobbing. "I still might, and you're not exempt either, you scheming woman." Mel paled at my threat, slowly retreating from Rob. Snarled at her, "Pick up this worthless piece of trash and get him out of my sight. You have maybe a minute before I finish him off for good." Mel struggled to lift Rob. His dead weight proved challenging for her. She looked at Glenda. Mel pleaded, "Help me with him, Glenda." Glenda had regained some composure. She simply replied, "No, you two are on your own. I agree with you being a despicable person." Mel managed to place Rob on a patio couch. Then, she hoisted him into a fireman's carry and disappeared into the kitchen, stumbling. I glanced at Glenda. "You weren't aware?" "No, I mean, I had some suspicions about Rob over the years, but not about Mel. I think they're still seeing each other. Maybe she's involved with other guys too. I'm not sure." The garage door opened. I stepped inside and looked out the front door. Mel had Rob in the passenger seat of her SUV. They drove away. Glenda entered the house. She was an attractive woman, blonde, 46. She was dressed nicely for the dinner party, but tears streaked her face, and her makeup was smudged. I regarded her. "Would you like more wine?" "No thanks." "Can you clarify all of this for me?" I proceeded to explain. Glenda sat at the kitchen table. When I mentioned the post-Christmas retreats, Glenda remarked, "Rob always went on a winter ski trip." Then, "I hate skiing. I stayed home with Mark." Mark was her son. "I wonder where they actually went," I said. "Who cares? This is all too overwhelming," Glenda replied. "I'm sorry, Glenda. I thought you were aware. Are you really getting a divorce?" I informed Glenda that she could spend the night, offering her the guest room, and she agreed. Subsequently, our conversation turned to reminiscing about the past and speculating on Rob and Mel's current rendezvous. I had shared with her the recording of Mel's call to Rob, which left little doubt that their affair was ongoing. At 10 o'clock, we enjoyed burgers and discussed practical matters, such as our living arrangements. I had found an apartment close to my workplace, assuming that Mel and I would divide the funds from the house sale. For the time being, I was staying put. Glenda decided to retire to bed, and I accompanied her upstairs to ensure the guest room was prepared. It was all set, and I provided her with a towel and toothbrush. As I was leaving, she expressed, "I've always liked you, Tim. Mel never really appealed to me. She seemed to view me as inferior. I suppose I understand why now." I waved goodbye and closed the door. The following morning, I was up early, relieved that the police hadn't shown up. My assumption was that neither Rob nor Mel wanted any public involvement. I inquired of Glenda about her plans. She mentioned she intended to stay at her mother's place until Rob left theirs. I provided her with my lawyer's email and advised her to seek counsel for guidance. Observing her car still present, I offered to accompany her to retrieve more of her belongings, which she accepted. Thus, I retrieved a pistol from my gun safe and trailed her to their residence. However, upon arrival, Mel's vehicle was absent. Glenda and I entered the premises to find it empty. Contemplating the extent of harm inflicted, I entertained thoughts of wishing misfortune upon him, perhaps hoping he'd be confined to some decrepit hospital, succumbing to a CI infection and dehydration, or worse. Glenda took a seat and mused, "I wonder where they've gone. Let me check." I offered, "I'll run the phone locator again." As I did, I pondered why Mel hadn't noticed it earlier. This time, her phone pinpointed to Cambria Hospital. I phoned the hospital and inquired about Rob, only to learn that he had been admitted. Informing Glenda of the news, she opted to stay at her residence and changed the locks. Thus, I headed to Home Depot, procured a variety of new hardware, some for her, some for myself. Spending the morning installing the locks at her place, I handed her the keys before departing. However, feeling sympathetic, I expressed my desire to return, to which she agreed, promising to cook for me. Completing the lock replacement at my house, I also had spare keys made for both Glenda and myself. Returning to her place around 4 o'clock, I received a call on my cell from Detective William James, who wished to speak with me. "I'm at 204 Western Street. Mrs. Glenda Miller is present as well," I informed him. "She's the other witness, the victim's wife." He inquired. "He wasn't a victim, Detective." "And yes, that's who she is. Are you coming over?" "I can be there in 15 minutes. James, a light-complexion African-American, arrived shortly, dressed sharply in a suit and expensive loafers. Glenda welcomed him at the front door, and he introduced himself. Then, glancing between us, James asked, "Are you too close?" Glenda retorted, "No, it's our spouses who are fooling around, not us," then turned to me, adding, "Yet," with a flat tone suggesting inevitability. James stared at her, then at me before saying, "Maybe you'll get lucky, man." I responded with a tentative, "Maybe," glancing at Glenda, who held my gaze steadily. It didn't strike me as the optimal strategy for dealing with the police interview. James voiced his preference, saying, "I'd prefer to talk to Mrs. Miller first." Glenda guided him to the back patio, where I noticed him activating the recording function on his phone. Their conversation lasted close to 20 minutes. When Glenda returned inside, she motioned for me to join them on the patio. As I walked past her, she whispered, "I meant what I said." Her candid proposition was a genuine distraction. I'd always admired her, both intellectually and physically, however, I wasn't one to stray, at least not yet. The detective informed me of the recording and prompted me to recount the events. I began with the revelation about my children actually being Rob's, which I had only recently discovered. I recounted the events of the Friday dinner and his subsequent reaction. Additionally, I detailed our altercation, striving for accuracy. Upon finishing, the detective inquired, "How did you come to learn this?" "I'd rather not discuss that. Let's just say no one divulged anything, it was purely coincidental." "Fair enough. Well, Mr. Miller, your version aligns quite closely with the testimonies of the other spouses. I haven't had a chance to interview your brother yet. Why not? Following my conversation with your wife, it seemed apparent that he was the instigator and you were responding. Besides, he's not in great shape at the moment. He'll need to remain under observation for a day or two for further tests. I asked, are we doing testicular tests? He gave me a stern look. It's not really a joke. A kick in the groin can get you in trouble. However, he then turned away with a smile. What's going to happen next? I'll document it and forward it to the state's attorney. She will make a decision. I'll talk to your brother. Detective James stood up, and I escorted him into the house where Glenda joined us on her way to the front door. As he walked away from the door, he looked back at us. I hope you both enjoy the evening. With that, he headed for his car. Glenda closed the door behind him. Standing right in front of me, she tilted her head up slightly. There's a hearty salad in the fridge for dinner. Take your time, she said in a tone that left no room for misunderstanding her intentions. I do not know how women do it. I kissed her. It was an unspoken invitation, and I saw no reason to refuse. She dissolved into me, and our kisses led us to the couch. She pulled me to her. Her persistence was obvious, and I reciprocated. I stood over her while undressing. She took off her dress, leaving only a bra. Later, I assumed that she had set it up by dressing up for seduction. If so, it worked surprisingly well. When I got an erection, she grabbed it. I groaned in response. I lifted her onto the couch, and we engaged in sexual activity. Afterward, I disengaged, and she rose to her feet, removing her pink thong. She handed it to me as a memento of our encounter, reminiscing about our first time with a smile. She used to be quite promiscuous, which I found acceptable. Taking my hand, she guided me to the kitchen where we had dinner before retiring upstairs. She acknowledged that our actions might be seen as a form of rehabilitation but expressed her lack of concern about it. By then, our bodies in their middle-aged state craved rest, and we indulged in it. I awoke before her, finding myself in the master bedroom shower, lathering up when she joined me. This led to another intimate encounter. We washed each other and then dried off together. Afterwards, we satisfied each other's desires. Later, we showered once more and enjoyed some breakfast. It being Sunday, we pondered the whereabouts of our respective spouses, though neither of us was religious. I tracked Mel's phone location and found out she was at my mother's house. This served as a reminder that I needed to have a discussion with my mother, who likely played a role in my betrayal. I raised this issue with Glenda. She responded, I'm not entirely certain about any of this, how it happened, you know. Maybe it doesn't matter. It matters to me if my mom was involved, plus I need to talk to Mel. She might have gone home and couldn't get in, but she hasn't made any effort to see me or communicate. They're probably coordinating their stories. I'm going over there. Want to join? I'm always up for it. I've got a natural inclination for it. You've brought that out in me, she chuckled. Are you coming with me to confront my mom? Yeah, why not? Let's make it clear what we've done. Exactly what's the point of revenge sex if the cheaters aren't aware? We both laughed. We arrived at my mother's place. Shirley Miller's car was parked there. Glenda and I stepped onto the porch, and my mom greeted us at the door. Leave, Tim. You've hurt Rob. Rob had it coming. He tried to hit me, my mom said. I'm here to find out your involvement in this. If I walk away now, I won't return ever. Reluctantly she allowed me in, with Glenda trailing behind. Mel was seated in the kitchen. As soon as she spotted me and Glenda, she understood. You're quick, aren't you? She snapped. Didn't waste any time. No reason to wait. Your boyfriend can't bail me out anymore, but your husband certainly can, I retorted. Mel jumped up, but I held her back. My mom shouted at us to stop. Turning to me, she sighed. Tim, you may have messed everything up by running off with Glenda. No, we're both free agents now. Mel and Rob always had that. Glenda and I have some catching up to do, and we're off to a good start, Mel interjected. You should listen to me and your mom. We can put everything out in the open and maybe find some healing. Tim glanced between his wife and mother. I'm all ears. Shirley exchanged a look with Mel. We wanted children, you and me. But when we decided to try, your mom informed me that you were unable to have kids. No chance. You didn't know, Shirley admitted, but I had a solution. Rob could impregnate Mel and you'd never be the wiser, I expressed. So you made this decision without consulting me, Shirley explained. Your father wanted to discuss it with all of us, but he was outvoted. It was 3-1. Yeah, it was you two cheaters against Dad. We explored different options, including medical ones, but they were too costly and time-consuming. Plus, you'd have to be aware you were raising Rob's children, Mel interjected. So we reluctantly opted for the natural method, I retorted. And you deceived and sneaked away to be intimate for a week, 2 weeks even, and you enjoyed it, didn't you, Mel? She glanced down. Once we got past the initial hesitation, I did enjoy it, I won't deny it. And it was successful, I pointed out. Successful all 3 times. And you eagerly anticipated your encounter with Rob, Mel admitted. Yes, I did. He's a good man, Glenda interjected. Oh, is he? What about me? He deceived and cheated on me, Shirley justified. We figured you might not approve, Glenda frowned. You were absolutely right. I wouldn't have consented then, and I still don't. You've at least contributed to my divorce, probably Tim's too, Mel tried to reassure. No one needs to get divorced. Neither of you knew anything, and you were both content until now. What changed? My medical checkup. The doctor informed me I've been infertile since birth. William isn't mine biologically, Mel looked down. Now you know everything, Tim. We can move past it. You care about those kids. You care about me, I remarked. Mel, you and he just continued your affair even after having 3 kids. You persisted until you started working for his company, and I'm willing to bet you never stopped, Glenda snapped. Well, what about you? How many times have you and Rob slept together in the past year? Shirley looked at Mel with disbelief. Mel, please tell me this isn't true, I added. We fell in love. We were compatible emotionally and physically, so we continued seeing each other, Mel reasoned. Yeah, like last week at the Shed Penis Motel, I said. Mel appeared startled. Did you hire a private investigator? I just tracked your phone, Mel stuttered. We can end it. We will end it. It's you I want, Tim. Glenda interjected, I want him too. You can go off with your new love interest. There's no turning back. Shirley, who had been standing, suddenly sank into a kitchen chair. She looked pale. Mom, are you all right? Tears streamed down her face. What have I done, dear God? Glenda remarked. Keeping secrets and telling lies only leads to more secrets and lies. You should have been honest with Tim from the beginning, Mel reasoned. Then none of our children would exist, so maybe Shirley didn't do so bad after all. I gazed at Mel, my voice heavy with emotion. Mel, you're missing the point. You, Rob, and even my own mother have conspired and betrayed me. Reflecting on my life now, it feels like a grand illusion. You've robbed me of my existence, stripped it of its essence. I sank down, overwhelmed by sadness. Mel approached, but I recoiled, tears streaming down my face. Never again, Mel. Never again, I choked out. Glenda embraced me from behind, tears mingling with ours. Eventually, I rose, and Glenda and I departed, alone without anyone following. Back at her house, neither of us felt much like doing anything. We tended to the garden, mowed the lawn, and shared a quiet lunch. Eventually, conversation started to flow. I broached the subject tentatively. "Glenda, are you certain about the divorce? You and Rob have been together for so long," I said. Glenda responded solemnly, "Remember what you said about them stealing your life? That's how I feel. I'll meet with your lawyer tomorrow. We'll go together, but I can't see a path back. Too much time has passed, and too much harm has been done." I nodded in agreement. "That's what I think too. I just worry about the kids. If we do get divorced, they'll need to know why. How do I even begin to tell them?" "Give them a call or send them an email and ask them to call you," Glenda suggested. And so, I spent the afternoon composing an email to my 3 children. After laying out the facts, I reassured them that they would always be my children, that I would always cherish and love them. With a heavy heart, I hit send, urging them to reach out. Approximately an hour later, my mobile phone signaled a notification. It was my daughter Mary checking in on me. "Dad, are you all right?" she asked. "I'll manage. But how about you?" "This is a lot to process," I replied. "All I know is that I love you, and you'll always be my dad. But I'm lost when it comes to Mom and Graham." "How could they?" she expressed, her voice filled with confusion and hurt. "Graham believed she was helping me. She didn't realize the extent of their relationship. As for your mom, I don't think I'll ever forgive her," I stated firmly. "What you choose to do is your decision. I need time to figure things out," Mary admitted. "I hope you find some sort of resolution, even if it's difficult," I said, my tone reflecting my uncertainty. "Yeah, it's a tough situation. Anyway, I just wanted to talk to you," Mary said softly. "I love you," I replied. "I love you too," before we ended the call shortly after. Brad phoned, and we had a similar conversation. William called at 11. Having read the email, he seemed more reserved than the others, I noticed. Things about Mom when I was home alone while everyone else was at school, I ignored them. "But I should have said something," he confessed. "I'm sorry, Dad. Don't blame yourself. You were in a difficult position and you didn't know everything," I reassured him. Our conversation ended shortly after. William sounded troubled. He had always been close to his mother, or so I thought. I couldn't help but wonder how much he truly understood about her and Rob. Glenda and I found ourselves in the kitchen flipping through an old photo album together. It contained various snapshots of her families and my upbringing. Soon enough, tears welled up in our eyes. Glenda hesitated, saying, "Maybe this wasn't such a good idea." "No, we need to confront what's been lost," I reassured her, putting my arm around her and offering a comforting embrace. We continued to reminisce over more memories before retiring to bed. Though we slept together, our intimacy was purely platonic. On Monday morning, we visited the lawyer's office. Millie Stanton seemed uneasy addressing both of us simultaneously, but we insisted. Millie, a stout woman in her late 50s sporting a retro bouffant hairstyle, briefed us on the fundamentals of divorce in the state. She mentioned adultery as grounds for divorce, albeit no longer favored. However, she acknowledged that our circumstances were far from ordinary. We devised a plan to file for divorce individually and for me to pursue Rob for overdue child support. Millie expressed discomfort with Glenda's presence during this discussion, given Rob's financial entanglements with her. She assured us she would address this aspect in the filings or consider delaying the lawsuit against Rob until after the divorce decree. I requested to have Mel served at the workplace, synchronized with Rob's timing aiming for Wednesday. I accompanied Glenda to her bank to assist in segregating their assets, which took some time. Afterwards, we had a late lunch at Bond's Italian restaurant, returning to her place around 4. I decided to swing by my house, and she joined me. No one had tampered with the new locks, so we entered. Glenda glanced around, revisiting the familiar sights of her home for many years. As I turned, I found her close by, wearing a certain expression. "I want you to make love to me on our bed right now, please," she uttered. Unable to resist such a fervent plea, I lifted her and carried her upstairs, depositing her on the large bed in the master bedroom. She chuckled, "You're quite the strong brute. There's no way Rob could manage that." She proceeded to undress, and so did I. Naked, we fell onto the bed together. Initially, it felt strange for me, engaging with another woman in this bed. However, any discomfort quickly dissipated when Glenda took my erect member into her mouth. She was insatiable, flipping me onto my back. She straddled me, taking control, seizing what she desired, culminating in an intense orgasm that left her breathless, nearly causing me to lose myself as well. Afterward, we lay there in silence for a while. Eventually, she spoke. "That was incredible. Taking the other woman's husband on her own bed. It doesn't get any better than this." I grinned and remarked, "You're quite the vindictive one, aren't you?" "Yes, and all for your benefit. Well, mostly mine." "But you enjoyed it." "Absolutely. We've reached the pinnacle of revenge sex," she chuckled. "Yep, it's all downhill from here." Yet it wasn't downhill at all. We made love throughout the night until we could go no further. In the morning, before heading to work, I made gentle love to her. It was tender, and she cried in the shower afterward, as did I. Nonetheless, we dressed and went about our day. Glenda took one of Mel's workout outfits, presumably as another act of revenge. It was a bit snug around the chest. Mel called me at work. "I need to get into the house to grab some things. I'm here at work in a shabby dress. I can meet you at the house at 6. "Is Rob out of the hospital?" "No, he still needs a procedure." "You really messed him up. Where are you staying?" "At your mom's house." "I'm in your old room." Irony, right? "And where are you and the other woman staying?" "Here and there." "You'll have to give up one of the houses." "What will you do when Rob gets out?" "Not my problem." "Have you heard from the kids?" "No." "Did you?" "What have you done?" "I sent them an email explaining what happened and talked to them on the phone." "Oh, Tim, they'll hate me." "They haven't reached out." "None of them." "You know you deserve." "You!" she yelled, and I hung up. I encountered Mel at the residence around 6 o'clock. Surprisingly, she was punctual, which was a positive development. After she parked her car, I unlocked the door for her and she proceeded upstairs. Suddenly, there was a scream. "You slept with her on my bed." "I can sense it." "I can't believe you would stoop to that level." I approached and remarked, "She initiated it." It was her way of seeking revenge for her husband being taken. Frankly, it's not enough in my opinion. Mel's anger seeped out of her. She gathered some clothes and I assisted her in carrying them downstairs, along with a toiletry bag. Once she had packed up, seemingly unaware of the missing garment that Glenda had worn, she inquired, "Is there any chance we could?" "No, none whatsoever." I meant every word, Mel. "It's over between us." She appeared deflated yet unsurprised. "I initially hoped for a happy family like any other wife. It seemed like the right path, but then things went astray." "I'm sorry for that," she expressed. "I can't accept that apology. Having another man's children and engaging in years of infidelity is beyond forgiveness. Sorry doesn't even begin to cover it. And frankly, I doubt your sincerity," I retorted. She got into her car and drove off. The next day, she was served with divorce papers at work, while Glenda had Rob served at the hospital later that afternoon. My mother called. "Tim, did you have to be so hasty with the divorce papers? Perhaps if you cooled down, things could be resolved." "That's not happening, Mom. She's been having an affair with Rob for years," I disclosed. "Don't Tim me, Mom, and don't forget who initiated this mess." "Oh, I remember. Everything was fine until last week," she remarked. I bid her goodbye. I hadn't made a decision regarding her yet, considering she was the root cause of it all. I was skeptical about her intentions. Spare us from overly righteous individuals. Rob was discharged from the hospital on Friday. Unable to return home due to the threat from Glenda, who possessed his firearm, he sought refuge at our mother's place. Mel happened to be there too. I couldn't care less about their continued presence, even if they occupied my old room or his. However, if my mother condoned their stay, she meant nothing to me. After discussing it with Glenda, we agreed to investigate the situation. Since I still had a spare key to the house, we decided to wait until 2 a.m. before proceeding. I drove us there and used the key to enter through the back door, carrying a pistol for protection while Glenda waited downstairs. Stealthily, I made my way upstairs to peek into my old room, suspecting they would be there as it had a double bed, unlike Rob's room. To my confirmation, both of them were indeed present. With my phone ready, I switched on the light and took a few photographs. There was uproar, mainly from Mel, who was unclothed. While Rob, though also undressed, had a sizable bandage around his lower ribs, impeding his movement. Mel hastily covered herself with the sheets. At that moment, my mother rushed down the hallway and caught sight of me. "Tim, refrain from making hasty assumptions," she advised. "I'm not. It's unnecessary. You approve of their actions? What they continue to do?" I turned and descended the stairs. Glenda was waiting below. She remarked, "I assume they were together?" "Yep. Let's go." Mom and Mel hurried over. Mel was wearing a robe. "Bad boy, Rob was nowhere to be found," Mom remarked. "They're adults. What could I do? Kick them out? That's my old bed. Seems like Rob's mission is to sleep with her everywhere," Mel interjected. "He didn't sleep with me. He couldn't." "You heard him," I chuckled at her. "But you tried, didn't you? So what? I stand no chance with you, true? I hope you both rot in hell." I turned to my mom. "I'm done with you. I'm still your son, but not anymore. You have one now, not me." Glenda and I departed, heading back to her place against all odds. When we went to bed at 4, we made love passionately. Glenda and I remained together as the divorces processed through the court. Mel and I sold the house and divided the money. She received no alimony or anything else from me. The judge disapproved of her actions. My children adapted to the situation. The two eldest had minimal interaction with Mel aside from exchanging Christmas cards. They avoided her calls, and although Will did engage with her, he wasn't very forgiving. When it was time for him to spend a summer between school years, he chose to stay with me. Rob had no contact with Mel at all. Despite her attempts to meet him for lunch, Will refused to speak to Rob. Glenda received the majority of assets in the divorce settlement. She retained the house and received a significant lump sum from Rob's business. Meanwhile, Rob was living with Mel in a one-bedroom apartment close to his workplace. Shortly after the divorces were finalized, Glenda and I had a discussion. While our sexual chemistry remained strong, we realized that we were not compatible in other aspects. Therefore, I decided to move out. Neither of us was particularly saddened by this decision. I think we both knew from the beginning that our relationship couldn't last due to unresolved issues. However, Glenda did request that I visit her occasionally for sexual encounters, provided she hadn't entered into a new relationship, or vice versa. I agreed, as our physical connection was strong, and we got along well in that regard. I underwent a procedure that effectively resolved my issue. At the age of 49, I was no longer infertile. However, I didn't see much benefit in that. That's what I thought one evening at the gym where Ned and I practiced our self-defense. I witnessed a woman vigorously kicking the heavy bag. She was fierce and looked remarkable. When she finished, she glanced back at me feeling intimidated. She asked, "Are you Tim?" I replied with a smile, "Definitely." She chuckled. "I observed you. You're not scared of me." "Not scared, no," I admitted. "I'm Hilda Mars, and you're Tim Miller." "I'm going to shower and grab some coffee," she said, gesturing towards a nearby shop. "I'll join you in 10, I offered. "Make it 15. "I do need to embrace my womanhood, after all," she said with a grin. There was no doubt about it. We had an enjoyable conversation. She was new to the area, 36 years old, with a high school-aged son and no husband. She had left him on the West Coast. We chatted for nearly 2 hours, discussing various topics. By the time the shop was about to close, she had learned everything about my life, including my medical history. I was completely captivated. Furthermore, she seemed genuinely interested in me. At that time, I owned a 2-bedroom bungalow about a mile from the gym. It took us 2 weeks before she decided to spend the night with me. During our encounter, she showed the same intensity as she did in the gym. However, I took the lead, which she wanted. This dynamic was powerful and satisfying for both of us. My son's name was Donald, a 16-year-old junior. We bonded easily since he played baseball, just like I used to. Eventually, I started helping with the high school team. Hilda and I got married 6 months after we met because she was expecting. It was a quick decision, a shotgun wedding. Donald and Hilda moved in with me to a house near my old one. Donald had his own room, and we set up some gym equipment in the basement for Hilda to stay active. Soon after, Thomas Timothy Miller was born. To me, he was a blessing. Mel and Rob quickly became a part of the past. She switched agencies and started seeing a younger plumber around 40. She still had her charm. Glenda married James Wilder, an old college flame. Hilda and I occasionally spent time with them, and James seemed like a decent guy. Glenda still had her allure, and I assumed things were still passionate between them. James and I even talked about it, which oddly brought us closer. I never fully forgave my mother, but I did visit her. She was overjoyed when Thomas was born, and Hilda made sure she could see him regularly. My mom passed away last June. The memorial service was peaceful despite our complicated family dynamics. Rob gave a speech, but I chose not to speak, and he wisely kept his distance from me.